Welcome along, everybody. So, get ready for a Labour U-turn on immigration. Shabana Mahmood wants to make it tougher, basically, the immigration laws. He said it will take 10 years for most migrants to get indefinite leave to remain, up from 5 years. Medium-skilled workers might have to wait 15 years, refugees might have to wait 20 years, with status reviewed every 30 months. Illegal migrants or overstayers could face up to a 30-year wait, and they will have to meet tougher income levels, speak English, and in some...
Keir Starmer blinks first, the immigration U-turn that could define his premiership. There is a particular kind of political humiliation that arrives not with a bang, but with a quiet, carefully worded government statement about transitional arrangements and consultation responses. And if you have been paying even the slightest attention to Westminster this week, you will know exactly what we are talking about. Welcome back to British Energy, the channel where we cut through the noise, hold power to account, and give you the analysis that actually matters. If you are new here, do yourself a favor and subscribe. It costs you nothing, it means everything to this channel. And frankly, in a political climate this volatile, you cannot afford to miss a single update.
But step forward, Angela Rayner. She thinks these reforms are un-British. So it's un-British to not let a load of foreigners who don't speak English, don't work and don't integrate into our country, is it? Maybe this is Angela Rayner's version of Britain.
You were there for me, and I don't believe I could have done that without you.
Good grief, that's just Angela Rayner there in a mosque talking to what appeared to be a room full of exclusively men about Gaza, using the same voice that you normally use to order food abroad. Just today, around 300 illegals broke into Britain across the Channel. Would it be un-British to want to deport them? Is it un-British to not want 40% of new homes to go to migrants by 2030? Is it un-British to want to deport a Sudanese man who molested a 5-year-old girl? He was sentenced to 11 years in prison today. The murmurs are, though, that Starmer is now considering U-turning on that stricter immigration policy that I outlined for you moments ago. He's worried about a backlash from his own MPs, a backbench revolt. Well, I personally think he should be a bit more worried about a public revolt, because Brits support extending the waiting period for indefinite leave to remain. In fact, only 20% of people tend to oppose or strongly oppose it. If Starmer caves in, then we know it's actually Angela Rayner who is really running Britain. Let's get the thoughts of my panel tonight. The director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, pub landlord and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. Mark, I'll start with you. Do you think Labour's going to U-turn then on these tougher immigration policies?
Almost certainly. I mean, the smart money is always that Labour U-turns, right, on any given policy. That's the likelihood. The strategy here from Rayner, I mean, I find the terminology of this being un-British absolutely bizarre. You might criticise the policy for other reasons, particularly its retrospective elements, you might say, are unfair or are too harsh, but it's clearly not un-British. What's happening is that Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham, who seem to be working hand in glove, are positioning themselves to make a attack on Starmer from the left and presumably unseat him and remove him. The bit of polling data you gave us there, Patrick, suggests that this will go down like a cup of cold sick with the public. But I think they're now playing a base strategy of let's just be very, very left-wing, try to cobble together 20 or 25% of the vote, perhaps see off the threat posed by Zach Polanski and the Greens. So I'm expecting to hear considerably more of this nonsense, up to and including the point at which Keir Starmer is removed, and thereafter it's likely to be the plans and proposals of the next Labour government, whoever's leading it.
What do you make of her comments that it would be un-British to essentially have tougher immigration rules?
I find that utterly ridiculous and actually disgusting. Keir Starmer stood outside number 10 at the start and said he would put country before party. Now, how is allowing mass immigration, mass illegal immigration, the rape, the murder and the fleecing of taxpayers' money by these chancers, asylum seekers, how is that British?
Now, let us talk about Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, and what is shaping up to be one of the most embarrassing internal retreats of this young Labour government. Cast your mind back just a few weeks. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood stood at that dispatch box with all the confidence of a government that believed it had finally found its backbone on immigration. The plan was bold, some might say audacious. Migrants who arrived in the United Kingdom would now need to wait 10 years rather than the current 5 before qualifying for indefinite leave to remain. That's the settled status that gives someone the right to live and work here without restrictions, access to benefits, access to social housing, the full package, if you will. But here's where it got genuinely contentious. The Home Secretary did not just announce the new 10-year rule going forward, she announced it would apply retrospectively. That means individuals already living here, some of whom are just months away from hitting that original 5-year threshold, would be told effectively, start the clock again. Another 5 years. Another half a decade of uncertainty. Ms. Mahmood's justification was not without logic. She pointed to the extraordinary levels of migration this country experienced between 2021 and 2024, levels she argued that would have historically taken 4 decades to accumulate. She warned of a £10 billion strain on public finances if hundreds of thousands of low-skilled workers and their dependents were granted settlement all at once. She invoked NHS waiting lists. She invoked the social housing crisis. She made the moral and fiscal case with considerable force. And then, Angela Rayner walked into the room. Now, if you are new to British politics, here's a brief but important character note. Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer have never exactly been each other's warmest admirers. Since her departure as Deputy Prime Minister, Rayner has been something of a free agent within the Labour movement, and free agents in politics, particularly ones with her profile and her base, can be extraordinarily inconvenient for a sitting Prime Minister. Her speech on this matter was not quiet, it was not diplomatic. She called the retrospective element of the policy a breach of trust. She used the phrase moving the goalposts. She spoke to the raw anxiety of Labour MPs in constituencies where many of those affected by these changes actually live, people who played by the rules as they understood them and are now being told the rules have changed mid-game. The Labour backbench rebellion that followed was, by all accounts, significant enough to rattle number 10.
Stay with us, because this next part is where it gets genuinely interesting. And if you have not already subscribed to British Energy, now is a very good time to do so. We are in this for the long game, and so should you be. Sources, speaking to Politico, have confirmed that the government's internal position on this policy had already been shifting before Rayner even opened her mouth publicly. Let that sink in for a moment. The Home Secretary delivered what sounded like a firm, non-negotiable policy position. The Prime Minister stood behind it, and behind closed doors, it was already moving. What the government is now looking at, according to those same sources, is a set of transitional arrangements for people already in the UK who have not yet reached settled status. The precise details remain unclear, and the government is hiding somewhat behind the language of consultation, pointing to the 200,000 responses they claim to be reviewing before outlining their formal position. But let us be entirely clear about what is happening here. This is a government that announced a policy, faced internal dissent led by a high-profile figure with nothing to lose, and is now retreating while trying very hard to make the retreat look like considered governance. That is the oldest trick in the Westminster playbook, and it is a trick that voters and political observers have seen performed many times before. The government spokesperson's statement this week was a masterclass in saying a great deal while committing to very little. They spoke of welcoming those who contribute to national life. They spoke of settlement being earned, not automatic. They pointed, again, to the scale of migration between 2021 and 2024. But they offered no firm timeline, no clarity on exactly who would be protected by these transitional arrangements, and no acknowledgement that the policy as originally presented is no longer the policy. What does this tell us about Keir Starmer's authority within his own government? That is a question that members of the Labour Party will be asking themselves very quietly over the coming days, and that the Conservative opposition will be asking very loudly indeed. A Prime Minister who announces a flagship reform and then pulls back in the face of internal pressure is not a Prime Minister projecting strength. He is a Prime Minister managing factions, which is a very different thing, and historically a much less stable one. There is also a broader ideological tension at the heart of this episode. Labour came to power in part by acknowledging that the previous government had lost control of immigration numbers. They made the rhetorical pivot. They adopted harder language. They wanted to signal to the British public that they had heard the message. Ms. Mahmood's original announcement was very much part of that signaling. But Labour's base, its traditional voter coalition, its activists, its MPs in diverse urban constituencies, does not always sit comfortably with that direction. Angela Rayner understands this. She is not wrong that for many communities, the retrospective element of this policy felt like a fundamental unfairness. That tension is not new, it is structural, and every time Labour is in government, it resurfaces. The irony, and it is a heavy one, is that by trying to please everyone, Starmer's government may end up satisfying nobody. Those who wanted firm action on immigration will see this U-turn as weakness. Those who objected to the retrospective element will watch the government's careful language with deep suspicion, never quite sure how much ground has actually been conceded. And if you are sitting at home right now thinking this all sounds rather familiar, that is because it is. British political history is scattered with governments that tried to square circles on immigration and ended up looking confused, inconsistent, and ultimately without conviction in either direction. We will be watching how this develops very closely here at British Energy. The consultation response, whenever it arrives, will tell us a great deal about where Starmer's real authority lies, about how much influence Rayner still commands, and about whether this government has a coherent immigration philosophy or simply a series of reactions to the loudest voice in the room. Take a breath, stay informed, and please, if this kind of serious, no-nonsense political analysis is what you are after, subscribe to British Energy. Every subscription genuinely helps this channel grow, helps us keep producing content at this level, and ensures you never miss the moments that actually matter. Hit that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. And in a news cycle that moves this fast, you will be glad you did. This story is far from over. Neither is ours.